Welcome to the Blender Basics video tutorial series. This is Chapter 2, Working with Viewports. I am Jim Chronister. The Blender Basics tutorial booklet can be downloaded from the Central Dauphin School District website at www.cdschools.org/cdhs. Go to Staff, look under my name, and you will find the link to the book. Today's lesson is going to deal with working with viewports and maneuvering around in 3D space. You really have to get a good feel for that before you actually move on to making new objects. If you notice when you start out Blender, you start out with one central 3D viewport in the middle, and then of course you have your different property windows timeline down at the bottom. Remember in the previous chapter we mentioned the tool shelf over here at the side, which I will minimize to make that look a little bit better. And also remember that you can press this button to look at the transform properties of the object. I can actually scale or change the location of an object in here right within these settings to be a little bit more accurate than just hitting S to scale, G to rotate, and grab within the menu. Let's look at some different viewport configurations. How do I maneuver in 3D space? Well, by scrolling your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out. By holding down your mouse wheel like it's a button, you can rotate. And by holding down your Shift key and holding down your mouse wheel, you can pan around in space. Let's also look at some of the different ways that you can view your object more exactly. If you're used to technical drawing concepts where you work in a top view, a front view, and a side view of an object, we can actually change these by using the number pad on your keyboard. When you're working with a standard desktop computer, the number pad is strictly dedicated to your viewing commands. Now, if you're working with a laptop and do not have the number pad, you can actually make the 1 through 9 and 0 buttons going across the top of your keyboard, not the function keys, but the number keys, act the same way by going into the Files pull-down menu, going into User Preferences, and if I go into Input tab, I can emulate the number pad right here in this setting to act like a laptop computer. And if you were using this often, hit the Save as Default button and it will remember that setting for you as you work. Okay, so as we maneuver in 3D space, you'll notice a little viewport notification up here in the corner where this says User Perspective. Now, normally when I work, I don't like to be in a perspective view. I like to be in an orthographic view where things do not get smaller as they get further away. So how do you toggle between perspective and ortho? That is the number 5 key on your number pad. If I hit number 5, there I'm in an orthographic view. If I hit number 5 again, I'm back into perspective. And 5 once again back into orthographic. If you look at your number pad, a number 7 on your number pad puts you into a top viewport, which is like looking straight down on top of the object. If I hit a number 1, it rotates my view that I'm in a front orthographic view, which will tell you up here in the corner. If I hit number 3, I'm in a right side view. So 7 top view, 1 front view, 3 side view, just like you would lay out the views of an orthographic drawing. If I want backwards views, for example, instead of a front view, I want the back view, I can hold down my Control key when I hit the number 1, and I will now look at the back of the object. So, maneuvering around in 3D space, 7, 1, and 3, and of course 2, 4, 6, and 8 will rotate you around the views a little bit at a time, just like holding down your mouse wheel will rotate you. If you hit number 0 on your number pad, it will switch you into the camera view of what the camera actually sees. If I were to hit F12 on my keyboard, it will render a picture of what the camera is currently looking at. We'll zoom out a bit. So again, what I see when I hit F12, which is a rendered view of it, is the same as what I see. I'm going to hit Escape to get out of that view. This is what I see when I hit 0 on the number pad. This is to go back to the views. So front view, top view. Now, let's give you something that's a little bit easier to look at. I'm going to bring up a motorcycle that I modeled last year, so let's open that one up. So here it is. Let's minimize my tool shelf to make my viewport look a little nicer. Front orthographic view. So if I hit number 3, there would be my right side view, or in this case, the front view of the motorcycle. Top view, front view, right side view, 7, 1, 3. Camera view, 0. Now this is zoomed in to look at the motor. If I were to hit F12, it would render a picture, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. Okay, let's go back to a number 1. Front view. Here's the difference between orthographic and perspective. So here is a rotated orthographic view. If I hit number 5, there it is in perspective, where things are getting smaller as they get further away from you. Very difficult to work and model and add other objects in perspective view. I usually work in an orthographic view, and I do most of my modeling in a 7 view, a 1 view, or a number 3 view. A nice way to work with things. Now, how do I get more viewports if I want to work with things? Well, if I go up to this small triangle in the upper corner of the viewport, my cursor will turn into a small plus. If I drag down on that small triangle, I'll split the viewport and end up with 2. If I come back onto the triangle, let's grab the line between the two and pull that down to the size that I want. Okay, let's grab this triangle again, and let's split my viewport in half. So now I have 3 viewports, so maybe I would want this one to be a number 7. I'll put my cursor down in this one, and again hit number 1, which I'm already in. Let's say I want a camera viewport here, I could hit number 0, and now I'm in a camera viewport in this one. So as I work, and as I move things around, things are going to go a lot nicer for me as I go through selections. Now, as you move around in 3D space also, you're going to notice that you have, if you click with your left mouse button, you have a little 3D cursor, 3D bullseye that moves around with you. That's used for a lot of different things. For right now, just think of that as a place where if I were to make a new object, that's where it's going to go. If I right click, I can select other things. I'm going to join my viewports back together. So by putting my cursor over top of the small triangle, I can actually merge my viewports back together, put my cursor over top of this corner, go upward, merge those viewports back together, and now I'm just down to 1 again. So let's say, look at the gas tank. So I right click to select the gas tank. Gas tank is now selected. Let's look at these buttons along the bottom of your 3D view. And if I hold my mouse wheel down like it's a button, I can scroll back and forth in these window areas. So what's the first thing I have? Well, I have several menus in the viewport that I can work with. I'm interested in some of these buttons. Okay, edit mode or object mode. This is when you actually go in and you can actually edit the shape of the motorcycle gas tank. So I can grab single vertices and do different things while I'm in edit mode, but I can't select any other objects when I'm in edit mode. So I need to go back to go back to object mode. Now I can select other items, and then again go back into edit mode to change the shape of the feature. And there are some other different modes in here that will be talked about in later chapters. The next button over is actually your displaying of it. Wireframe is always a nice viewport to work in, or a view method you can work in, because you can select objects and see through them, and sometimes it's a little bit nicer when you're actually modeling to be in wireframe. Normally you're going to be in wire mode or solid viewing. The Z key on your keyboard does the exact same thing that I just did with this button. Okay, so solid, wireframe, and there are some other shading options in here that we can look at a later time. Next box over here is how do you want to have things pivot around. By default, it's usually at the median point of all the selected objects will be the pivot when you move things around. The next button over just kind of locks things so that centers can only be moved and not objects. Many times I see students press this button by accident and then they wonder why they can't move anything. So usually we don't mess with that too much. Let's look at this next option over. This is called a transform manipulator, or transform widgets we call them. So if I turn that off, that gets rid of the arrow that's on the object. If I turn that back on, now you see that red, green, blue cursor. Well, I can use this to move things. I could grab like the blue arrow and just move this gas tank up and down. Or I can grab the green one and just move it forward and back on the y-axis. And I could hit the red one and move it just forward and back on the z-axis. Okay, so I can move things. The next button over, that would be your move. Okay, this one would be your rotate. So now I get a little global thing on, so now I can actually rotate on each of the 3 axes that way. And we'll talk about other move commands a little bit later on in the next chapter. But you can do your rotations this way for an object. And the next option over would be scaling things. So now I could grab the blue and I could make this gas tank really flat or really fat. Okay, and again, skinny. Whoops, made it so skinny it just kind of flipped over. So change the width this way. I could change its length, make this thing however size I want it to be. Now, if you ever mess anything up, you can always hit Control-Z on your keyboard, and you have 32 steps by default of steps you can go back and undo. Control-Z to undo things. Alright, so you can mess with that. And you can change the way that its axis is from global to local, which we'll use later on in other chapters. Next option over, you see a bunch of little squares in here. These are the different layers. Right now, everything we've made is in layer 0. Here would be layer 2. Nothing's in layer 2. Okay, so it's good to start to define things into different layers. For example, I have the gas tank selected. If I want to move this to layer 2, I could hit M on my keyboard, and it brings up the options of the layers, and I'll just pick layer 2 and move off of it. And now there's a little dot on the second layer, and guess what? The gas tank is in layer 2, Everything else is in layer 1. By organizing things in different layers, it will make your productivity go a lot faster because you can turn things on and off as you need them. If you need both layers on, you can hold down the Shift key and left mouse button click and turn both layers on. Okay, what else do you have here? Some other options. This is a really nice one here, the little gray bullseye. This thing is called proportional editing. And what this will allow you to do is actually grab a single vertex while in edit mode and change the shape of the way the other vertices react to that one. We will talk about that one in a later chapter as well, but it's another nice tool. And what do you want to snap to? You can snap to different things and render pictures. You got some different buttons here across the bottom. So, again, that's a nice viewport to actually work in and take a look at some different things. So, we've kind of given you the basics on working with viewports. How do you split them up? How do you look at things in different views? And again, become comfortable with these viewing commands, how to maneuver around on the screen, how to pan, how to zoom, how to rotate, how to work within your principal views 7, 1, and 3. And we'll continue with some more practices in the next chapter.